Welcome back to Your Story, the podcast where our guests will tell theirs with the help of only 12 questions in under 30 minutes. This week, we welcome Jeff Macolino, podcast host, comedian, and possibly champion baseball player. Check out his stories. I think you're going to like it. Welcome back to Your Story, 12 questions, 30 minutes. The only podcast where our guests tell their story with the help of 12 questions and ideally in under 30 minutes. This week we are joined by Jeff Macolino, podcast host, comedian, and ALCS ring wearer / owner / former owner. And I'm going to let him get into some of that. But Jeff, welcome. We are very excited to have you tonight.
Thank you, Mike, for having me. Glad to talk to you again.
Yes. So what have I left out of that bio that you think should be included
there? Father, divorcee, alcoholic, probably. I don't know. It depends on what doctor you ask.
Okay.
Those are the main things. Those are the highlights.
All right. So let's go with the highlights. Comedian / podcast host. Which one of those do you lead off with when you meet somebody new?
Well, I'll be straightforward. It depends whether it is an attractive female or just anyone else. Typically, I will go with I do comedy writing and podcast hosting. I do stand-up sometimes. Now, comedian, I feel like is much better with an attractive woman. I feel like it catches the attention a little bit more. So I guess it depends on the person and the situation, how much I want to embellish about how great I am.
Fair enough. But I do feel like going in with a comedian or even stand-up comedy writer that you set the bar pretty high there. So what do you follow up with? Do you go with a joke? Do you tell stories? Or what does that conversation look like?
I always want to avoid the joke because it never works. One-on-one conversation is so hard to do like a set piece. So yeah, it's more the story avenue, and just generally I like to think that in just general conversation I'm funny enough. But the actual stand-up comedy can be very forced in like a one-on-one or even a small group scenario. It can, now that being said, I'm very socially awkward because I will say something funny and I will hold on. I got to write this. I got to put this in my phone so I don't forget this joke that I just made. I need to write this down.
Well, that's not socially awkward. That's being responsible to make sure that you are sharing those laughs at a later date. So nothing wrong with that.
Well, it's not socially awkward if I've established that I do comedy.
Fair.
Prior to that, it was extremely awkward when it would be like, hold on, I need to write this down. Don't distract me from this joke that I just made. Because they'd just be like, why do you need to write down a joke you just made? It's not normal for the average person.
Without the proper lead-in, yes, that could easily lead to, what are you talking about? Why are you doing that? Put the phone away. Has any of those conversations found its way into your stand-up, into any of your written material?
Yes, both. My observations are very helpful. One, not fully formed, but one time I was at a bar. This was pre-COVID, and probably 2 years before I ever stepped on stage to do comedy. A girl and I were talking for 20-30 minutes and things were going well. And then she asked me what dating apps I was on, and I lied and I said, I don't do that. And she looked at me and she's like, well, that's sketchy, and walked away. And I just started laughing hysterically, and I pull out my phone and my friends are like, what happened? I'm like, something really funny. I got to write it down. Just hang on. And my joke on that is, trust me, I'm not a serial killer, but if I were, I think I would be on every dating app, not on no dating apps. So it's it's come up in situations that are awkward before I actually went on. Like the first time you go on stage, from then on, it's like, well, he does comedy. So all of his eccentric behavior, you just have to kind of go with it. It's like a free pass to just be an ass. I mean,
No, I agree with you there. I'm not sure being or not being on a dating app would necessarily mean that you were a criminal of any sort. So I don't know if that really qualifies you for anything. But talking about that first time on stage, how, why, what was it like? What was the backstory to that?
well, so I was trying to write a couple of dark comedy screenplays, and they were very dark, but they weren't very funny. So I actually reached out to a bunch of comedians, and every single one of them, as far as advice, said just go do some stand up. This It doesn't need to be a career, just go do stand up. And most of them also said start a podcast. Just force yourself to talk. You'll find a voice. You can work stuff in and make things funnier. So that was basically the motivation, is I might as well go up on stage. What's going to happen? And I'd done a couple of open mics that were not comedy open mics. So like you could go play a song or you could read a poem, and like I'd go do comedy and make really bad jokes, and people would laugh just because it wasn't a sad poem or a bad song. So, or maybe they'd laugh because it was all equally as terrible. And it was the only time that it was appropriate to laugh, you know.
So you didn't pull them afterward to see why the laughter. You just knew like you were getting laughs. Like I want more of this.
Yeah, so I finally go to do a comedy club, and I made the mistake of telling a few family and friends. So open mics typically are mostly comedians, not a lot of audience, you know. So this particular night, there were 9 members in the audience. 6 of them were my best friends and my family members.
That's awesome.
You would think, but it was the worst set I ever did.
Okay, well,
I had a
tell me
slam
more,
dunk
please.
joke. I had a slam dunk joke in the beginning. I thought it was an easy laugh. Crickets. And I'm like, and in hindsight, it wasn't a great joke. Now, my friends and family, given that they know me, probably should have found it somewhat funny. But in general, it was an okay premise. It was a terrible joke. So when you're writing jokes for stand up, you know, the premise is the whole backstory of what crafts the joke, and then you got to hit punchlines off that premise. And my first set was a lot of premises and then no real punchlines. so so I didn't even, and then I also told a story which doesn't really leave a lot of room in a 5-minute set to get a lot of laughs. So it was a good learning experience. I felt so terrible that I did it in front of people that I knew. That didn't help.
What was the first thing they said to you when you got off stage? Do you remember?
Um, I instantly got off stage and went to the bathroom for 2 reasons. Because one reason was I had to pee. So
Makes sense.
legitimately, I had been sitting there. I didn't know. I knew I was getting close, and I was having a few drinks, but alcohol doesn't affect you. The adrenaline's going so much. Everything hits you once you get off stage. So I rushed to the bathroom to go pee. I came out, and one of my friends came to the bar, and the first thing I said before she said anything was, "That was the worst thing I've ever done in my life." And she's like, "No, I thought it was good." And I'm like, "I don't think you did, but it's sweet of you to say so."
That's a good friend.
Yeah, so they all were complimentary. Like, that was great for a first time. That was usually the cap for your first time. And it's like, yeah, that's, you know, that's never a good add-on when it's like, yeah, for your first effort, that was great.
Well, there are many people who will never take that first step, so you should take some solace in that. Was there any formal training, or did you look up, did you Google what a set should be, or what went into writing that 5 minutes?
So I think I actually, in hindsight, overanalyzed it.
Okay.
I wrote for 3-4 months a
Whoa.
bunch of different things, and oddly enough, I went with something that I didn't even consider. I had actually written an email to Nate Bargatze is a comedian who has a podcast, the Nate Land podcast. And I'd written an email about a story that I went to the doctor for my annual physical, and they asked me if I had concerns, and I list them off, and the only one that caught his ear, despite several bad things, I'm too fat, I need to lose weight, I sometimes think about killing myself. He didn't care about those things, but when I said I probably drink too much, that he jumped on, and then he gave me a quiz that he Googled. He Googled, like I could see his computer, a quiz to test me to see whether I had alcohol abuse disorder. And so Nate Bargatze's reading my email, they riff about it, and he says, Jeff, if you're a comedian, you should make that into a you should make that into a joke. And I did. The problem is when I practiced the joke and I had more funny bits in it, it was like 15 minutes and I had to scale it down to 5. So I took out all the funny bits. So I basically in 5 minutes attempted to get 4 laughs, and I was successful in 3 out of 4. So the only good thing about having friends there was that I gave one of them my phone and told them to record the set. So when I watched it back, I'm like, oh, I didn't try to get laughs. So I guess it wasn't a failure in being funny as much as a failure in overthinking and planning. And so that kind of set an early rule for myself of you can plan, but don't make a 5-minute script where it's not going to be funny because you're not going to be in the moment at all.
Okay. I think that's really, I don't want to say brave, but I'm impressed that you watched the video. How many times have you watched it since? Do you break it down, or is it one of those one time and that's it?
I think I watched it probably once by myself, maybe twice, and then I showed a handful of people who weren't there. I showed them the game film. So I probably watched it actually paying attention maybe 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
And well, it was helpful, I will say, because a couple times I went to make a joke in my head, and if you fumble words around in a joke, switch the order of a couple things in a sentence, it goes from being a joke to being just a statement. So it was interesting to be wow, these words really do matter, and the order of the words matter. So if you're nervous and rushing and you mix a little thing up in a prepared joke, you can really, the whole joke's not a joke anymore. It's just a sentence.
Well, I think that's really good advice, comedy or not, and unfortunately you found that out in the moment, and probably a couple times since, but good advice nonetheless.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's whether you're writing or speaking or trying to make a joke or just have conversation. Yeah, it can be very important. The tone and the order of words, they can make a big difference. Punctuation if you're writing.
Understood. And if you could go back to talk to yourself right as you're about to take the stage, or maybe even a couple minutes before to prepare, since you were writing for 3 or 4 months, what would you tell yourself? What would you do differently?
I would probably tell myself for the first set that I did to probably do a little more hacky jokes, meaning the really cheap, I call them poo-poo pee-pee jokes. They're easy, low-hanging fruit. They're jokes that make your 8-year-old boy laugh kind of jokes, just to build confidence. That's what I would have probably told myself, just get a set where these 6 people are going to laugh because they know you're making jokes. So they're there to support you, so they're going to laugh even if the jokes aren't great. And then never let my family and friends know that I was doing comedy again. That would probably be
so build confidence, play to the audience, and tell no one. Okay, good advice.
Yes. Now, if I had no friends and family there would have been 3 people. I would have said, do the same set and at least audio record it so you can understand what you did wrong.
There you go. All right, I did want to follow up on 2 things you said. First, you mentioned you reached out to a lot of comics. Was that via email? How did you pick which ones to contact, and did they all contact you back, or was there anything funny about that?
Um, Mostly just comedians that I knew and liked. They didn't all contact me back, but the thing that maybe gave me the confidence to reach out to a bunch of them, and with comedians, most of them, you can go to their website and just send them an email. They're they're relatively easy as far as celebrities to get in touch with.
Good to
Um,
know.
so the first one I reached out to was, he's fairly famous, Doug Stanhope, as far as being a stand-up comic,
Yeah,
and
it's
he
a
responded to
recognizable name.
me. Yeah, less than 30 minutes he responded to me.
Wow.
And what he said, and I'll parse it down, but in essence he's like, it's probably going to be garbage, so why even bother? And then he's like, I'm joking, just finish it, just do it. He's like, it's going to sit in a drawer in your desk, most likely for all eternity, because no one's going to buy it, no one's going to film it, but do it. And every time you open that drawer, you'll see it and you'll smile knowing that you finished it. And I loved that because it just kind of moved the goalpost a little bit. Like, it doesn't, especially the first thing you try to write, it doesn't need to be, I don't know, Pulp Fiction or Shawshank Redemption. It could just be something you're proud of that you started and finished it. So I like that input, just from a standpoint of, don't, don't be necessarily so hard on yourself that it doesn't need to be the best thing that's ever been made. Just just at least put the work in and finish it. And that in itself is something you should be proud of. I mean, it's the same thing when people self-publish a novel. In my opinion, it's like, I don't care if 12 people buy your book. You should be proud of the fact you put the work in. If you gave your best effort in writing this, you should be proud of it. Whether 12 people buy it or 12 billion people buy it, it's a lot of people.
That's more good advice. Yeah, if you sell 12 billion books, that's you're you're gonna head to the top of Amazon's list, self-published or not. But the other thing I was going to ask you there, you mentioned you got 3 out of 4 laughs, which would be a damn good batting average. And as I fumbled through my introduction of you, I mentioned that you have an ALCS championship ring, or let me correct myself again, had an ALCS championship ring. Could you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I worked for the Rays while I was in college. I started actually right when I graduated high school. So I started in 2005, June of 2005. Lou Piniella was the manager
It's taking us way
at the
back.
time. So I had a couple of interesting interactions with Lou Piniella. Uh, and there was a very awkward situation because that off-season ownership transferred from Vince Namoli to Stu Sternberg, and I was lucky enough that they actually hired me only because I harassed the HR manager with emails because I didn't want to work construction that summer.
Seems like the better
Uh,
of the two gigs.
well, and then he offered me like an usher role, and I'm like, well, but I want to watch the game, so I can't be worrying about tickets. I'm going to watch the game. And unfortunately, and he lived, but unfortunately, the guy who was in charge of press credentials, had a heart attack. So they
That is
needed to
unfortunate.
hire someone quickly. And the HR guy was like, I've got someone who's driving me insane. Call him. So I go in there. I have a full poofy afro because of a bet I made in high school. And I show up there and they're like, all right, tomorrow you show up. We'll pay you $30 a game to hand out the press credentials before, show up 3 hours before the game. You can leave when the game starts. And I'm like, well, I don't want to leave. So my very first day, the head honcho, Rick Vaughn, no relation to Charlie Sheen's character in Major League.
Is that
But
confirmed? No relation?
confirmed, yeah.
Okay.
Same name though. But he's like, well, if you want to stay for the games, you can sit up here in the press box. He's like,
Wow.
if you want to help out even more, you can go into the clubhouse after the game with a recorder and take quotes from the players and then type them out. And he's like, but can you cut your hair? Because I'm like, yes, I will get a haircut tomorrow. And then I worked there I started college in winter or fall of '05, and I worked there until I graduated. So I put in basically 4.5 seasons with the Rays.
I'm
And
just going to stop you for a second. So, just to recap, as an 18-year-old, you pretty much bullied your way into a job where you not only spoke to the manager, who was a Hall of Famer, I believe. You passed out press credentials, were in the press box, and got to watch any home game you wanted for free. You made friends with possibly Wild Thing Rick Vaughn, and you held the job for your entirety of college.
yes, yeah, my the one thing I always tell people is when I turned 21, the first person who took me out for drinks was Joe Maddon. Uh, Not entirely true, but close enough.
So we've buried the lead here by not starting with these stories. How was Joe Maddon involved in your 21st birthday?
Well, so he did a Thanksmas celebration between Thanksgiving and Christmas. My birthday is December 11th, so I'm smack dab between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
I'm sure he knew that as he was planning his Thanksmas out.
I think that was the requirement. He actually planned it around my birthday. but we went. I mean, we cooked dinner in the Tropicana Field kitchen. We cooked sauce and we made all these things with Joe Maddon, and Jim Hickey, the pitching coach, was there, and we were all cooking. And the last day of Thanksmas was 2 days after my birthday. Now, the night before, the Rays staff had taken me out for drinks, so it was technically the second time I went out drinking. It was the last night. We served food at a homeless shelter, and Joe Maddon said, "Hey, I'm taking everyone out for drinks." So it was me and a handful of my coworkers, Joe Maddon, Andrew Friedman, who's now the president of baseball ops with the Dodgers, won a World Series with them over the Rays. And that was my 2 days after I turned 21. We were drinking at a place called Tiny Tap in South Tampa.
Sounds lovely. While it wasn't your first, I think that's a pretty good 21st birthday party story.
Yeah,
and you've name dropped, and those are some pretty good names to do so.
Yeah, Joe Maddon also taught me how to cut up limes for Coronas, because we used to, in spring training, when he did his media session post-practice, we would serve Coronas, and we needed a lime cut up. So I had no clue because I don't put fruit in my drinks. So he had to teach me how to cut the lime for the drinks.
Did you mention to Joe that you did not put fruit in your beer, or did you just smile as he cut?
I probably did. I told him, how would I know? I don't put fruit in my drinks. I think even at that young age, I think I was ballsy enough to do that.
Good for
But
you.
I will. The year that they went to the World Series in 2008, and I got that ring. The one of the greatest moments of my life, aside from my children, of course, was spring training.
I see you winking there, just in case our audience is only listening to this.
In spring training, he called out the whole team, everyone invited to spring training, and the Rays had finished last place the year before, and he gave the whole speech about how we were going to be a playoff team, and this is why, and this is how. And I was in the circle with all the players because I was on the PR staff,
Wow.
so they introduced people who you need to know. And apparently I was someone they needed to know because I sometimes took them to interviews. I got the haircut. Otherwise, I would have been gone in 2006. I would have been out with Lou Piniella. But no, it was getting to see that speech and then see the team, progress throughout the season. And, there was a handful of those players that I was somewhat close with. It was quite an experience, especially at a young age. Something I hope I don't forget as I get old.
No, those are some good stories, but I would be wrong not to follow up on my question about the World Series. Excuse me, the ALCS ring.
Oh yes. Well, so I got
How'd you get it?
I got the championship ring in April of 2009. So, it had my name on it and everything. It was a beautiful, gaudy ring. I used to, I may or may not used to have worn it out to bars after the game. I'd only wear it on game days, but I had a girlfriend at the time, but I would use it to get drinks. I would just tap it on the bar, and they'd instantly come and get me a drink because I don't know, that may have been a jerky thing to do in hindsight, but I had it, beautiful ring, and when I moved into my new house, I had it in this very room I'm sitting in a fire safe, and it was 2 weeks after me and my future ex-wife moved into the house, and we were getting an alarm system installed. I want to say 1 or 2 days after this happened, someone broke in, stole it. Never have seen it again. The first couple years afterwards, the Rays called me twice with someone who thought they may have found the ring, but neither time was the case because I'm like, they gave out replica rings to the fans that were really cool looking and they looked like they could be real at a quick glance. But I'm like, just ask them if it says Macolino on the side of it. If not, it's not mine.
Okay. And where does the police investigation stand at this date?
I'm pretty sure it stands about the same place it did the day after it happened. It's dead.
Okay. Well, inquiring minds want to know. So you never know if the right officer gets promoted, they may reopen the case and examine all the leads. But as we were wrapping up here, I mentioned that you're a podcast host, and we've talked about it a few times. I believe you've told me you have over 50 episodes at this point. What do you talk about in your show?
I talk about a little bit of everything. It started with the idea of me just rambling into a microphone and figuring out how to try to, hope that I could find some funny bits in what I said to use. And quickly morphed to I like talking to other people, and it's either to laugh or to learn or to both. It's I've had a lot of comedians on. I've had some conspiracy theorists on. I had one guy who spoke to archangels. That was something.
On the show, or does he?
No, not on the show.
Not on the show. Okay.
I think he had to go in his garage where the orbs were floating or something. It was
okay.
Yeah, well, maybe I should have been on location.
So location specific. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, but generally, it's my goal is to learn or laugh or both, and usually have a drink along the way or two.
And is there a drink of choice while hosting?
I typically will go with this Crown Royal.
Okay.
It's usually my go-to. It's nice, smooth, and I drink it out of a big cup.
Solid choice.
A big boy cup.
It's the only kind. And then wrapping up, where can our listeners find you, or where are you most easily found?
Well, you can get the podcast probably anywhere you listen to podcasts. Spotify, Apple. It's got an IMDb page now. My website is jeffmacolino.com. It's pretty basic, but most comedy websites are pretty basic. It's just like, hey, if you want to hire me, click here and you can send me an email. And then, Twitter, I'm at Saint JMac because I live in Tampa and I root for the Saints. So I didn't pick all winners.
Not this year. We weren't able to dive into your NFL fandom tonight, but I will leave you with this. This could be it. Is there any questions I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
No, I don't think so. I think you've done an excellent job, sir.
Well, I appreciate that. And while we were not necessarily being totally serious, I think you gave a lot of great advice to potential comedians, to amazing stories for anyone who hopes to get a cool job in college and find out what actually happens once you land that job. And especially with the live and learn motto of the podcast. I think you can do a lot worse than either one of those things. So if you get both of them, sounds like something people should tune into. So Jeff, thank you very much for joining us this week. Check out the Jeff Macolino Show. Thank you for being here, and have a good night.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Mike.